On this episode of A State of Control, we talk about how end users and technology managers handle their existing systems. Is there a way to approach it with regard to standardization? And where do mainstream programming languages come into play? All that and more on A State of Control.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by SDVOE, the platform for networked AV.
A State of Control, episode 36, Digital Reckoning.
This is A State of Control.
Welcome to A State of Control, an AVNation podcast that highlights the control, programming, and automation aspects of the audiovisual industry. I'm your host today, Steve Greenblatt. Thanks for joining us. So we have a great show planned for you today, and this episode will touch on a trending topic that's impacting the AV industry and especially control and automation people, and that is the topic of standardization. And with me to discuss that are some familiar faces that I'm sure you all know if you are a frequenter of the show. So first, we'll start with the most familiar. His name is Uncle Richie, Rich Fregosa. How are you today, Rich?
I'm doing good. Mellow West Coast greetings on this 50th anniversary of the Summer of Love here. So I'm basking in the summer solstice and rocking out. Good to have the group back together.
There you go. And secondly, although he comes from a long distance out in Germany, he always makes time for us, and he's become a familiar face on our show as well. His name is Patrick Murray from Control House Design. How are you today,
Steve.
Pat?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. It's a nice beginning of the summer here in Germany. The sun is out till like 10 o'clock at night, so kind of enjoying it after the dark winter.
Excellent. And last but not least, the man who paved the way for me to host this show and who got us started, the fearless leader of AVNation. It is Tim Albright. How are you today,
Good
Tim?
Lord, me without my unitard fearless leader. I'm good, dude. How are you? What the heck am I doing here?
Got to give you some
cake.
props once in a while. Come
I
on.
appreciate that. I still don't know what the frick I'm doing here, but you know, we'll muddle through this. Thank you, sir.
You're keeping us honest.
Yeah.
So recently I've had a lot of conversations with technology managers who are with large end user organizations, and the common thread is the challenges that they face maintaining and managing their systems. They have a lot of systems that they've built throughout the years. They may be in different generations of control systems and also audiovisual equipment, and done by different types of either integrators and programmers. And what they face is how do they really wrap their arms around them and manage them and maintain them and move forward. And I know this is going to be a tough one to answer, but Rich, I'll start with you. If you have a customer that has existing systems, and it can be residential or commercial, without just ripping it out and starting over, what kind of guidance can you provide?
Well, I mean, it's always the rub. And I mean, a lot of the work that we do is just that, is takeover projects. And that's really the first question, which is, first thing is kind of determining why you're there in the first place. You know, are you there because you're just maintaining and helping and forming a new relationship and working with, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Or are you there to actually fix a problem, and how far does that problem go? I mean, it's kind of like taking your car into the shop, right? It's like, when I drive and I hear this tick, tick, tick sound and I'm not quite sure what's going on. And so that could mean anything. That could mean, and so that's kind of the first approach that we have to take when we come in is, what is that knocking that you're hearing, programmatically? Is it just a symptom of something simple, or is it a symptom of something greater? And there's the much deeper problem under the hood. Analogy, Uncle Richie again. But, we currently, we take that approach where it's, we have to deal with each project that we come in and first off, maintain the relationship. If they put something into the process, we want to help them out and not have to rewrite. But it's tough. I mean, again, right now, I wish I had a magic answer. I could say, immediately we just drop in this code and no matter what, it always fills itself in. It hasn't been the case. I'm interested to hear, I think, sometimes how other commercial dealers handle it. Especially, I mean, you guys deal with it a whole lot more than we do.
It is a tough conversation. And obviously, and we've talked about this a little bit before, just starting with getting the source code can sometimes be a challenge. So Patrick, when you're faced with a similar situation and when you're sitting down to have a conversation with a new customer, do you ask them, what are your existing standards? Or do you ask them what you're used to doing? Or do you just kind of start from, what do you need?
Well, yeah, obviously we tend to start with the end goal, right? Where are we going? And then figure out a way to get there. If there is an existing system already, it's really just that research in the beginning. Okay, what do you have? What kind of equipment do you have? Do you have drawings, right? Do you open up the rack and it's just a big mess of cables, or is it nicely done? And do you have the source code, like you said? And then the next step is really just to define, kind of get an idea of what are the inputs and outputs that we have already and what can we work with. And sometimes you run into a situation where, yeah, there might be bugs, like there might be divisible rooms and that one configuration never really worked right. And if you look at the programming and it just wasn't set up in a way that you can massage it into working, then you might have to rewrite the code again. Unfortunately, that does happen quite a bit. But I think just getting a handle on what's present, you know, what kind of devices you have, how everything's hooked up together, and then of course, how the code is set up, what are the inputs and outputs that you already have, and then you can make a decision if you could expand that or if you have to write some new stuff for it.
I think, I don't want to jump in, but Patrick kind of referenced something that, you know, we talk about over and over and over and over again, but I don't know that integrators always, again, because they're in a rush. It's documentation, 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 documentation. What Patrick was just saying right there, if you're opening up a piece of the software and you can't immediately have a list in that software that shows the inputs and the outputs and how things, you know, where this thing holistically is supposed to go. We've had times where, you know, we've gotten as-built, and those as-built were 2 years old. And tons of stuff happened in between that time. And then we go into the program, and the program hadn't been, their comments or anything hadn't been changed out as well. So you've got 30 things in that program that don't even exist anymore. And a big part of you know, what we found that we have to hammer, like Tim will tell the story over and over and over again, that if I can't write your manual out of your programming comments, you're not working for me. Because that's the only way that you're going to be able to deal with the project when you come back to it 5 years after the fact. Not 5 days, not even 5 months, but 5 years.
So Tim, I'll pull you in on this. Having worn the hat of a technology manager and a programmer in the past, how does that conversation go? And do you look forward and say, this is what I want this to be? Or do you look back and say, I have all of this stuff, how do I make it into, how do I get to the bottom of it?
But there's a couple different ways, right? I'll use one room, probably one of the last rooms I programmed at the college I worked for. It was put in probably 15 or 16 years prior, right? And what you do as a technology manager, at least what we did, is you would meet with faculty, meet with department heads, say, okay, here's a space. And it was one of their more widely used lecture halls. I mean, we're talking about, you know, the projector that came down out of the ceiling, the slide projector that came down out of the ceiling. It was very late 90s, you know, technology. And you say, okay, what do you want to do with this space? You know, okay, so what do we as technology managers, what did we have to work with? I don't know that there's a whole lot of value in going backwards and trying to say, you know, well, we have this over here. That's great. But, you know, if you're trying to push HD signals, and you've got an Extron IN1508, which was a great switcher back in the day, that ain't going to get you there, right? That was an analog switcher. Sure. So you go, okay, what are you trying to do here? What exactly are you working towards? And then you go, okay, so is the existing code viable, right? Or do you have to start from scratch? If the systems and the components that you're controlling, you're not going to switch them out, then yeah, the existing code probably can be reused and adjusted. But if you're virtually starting from scratch, again, with the end in mind, then yeah, you're starting from scratch code wise as well. And then you go back to what, you and Richie have taught me for years is you've got to be able to pass that down. I've been out of the college for 2 or 3 years now, and I will get calls every once in a while asking from the current folks that still work there, where's the code that I left because we put it in a shared network drive. And my first code was crap. I'll be very honest. It was not well documented. But as I met you guys and, my later stuff and the stuff that I left them towards the end is well documented within the code. And so they can open it up and they go, oh, this is what this is, right? And that's what you kind of have to do is you have to leave it not just for the next person, but for yourself. Because Rich is right. In 2 months or even in a couple of weeks, you're not going to remember what the heck you were doing with that specific program.
So I guess one of the things that is the solution to this is coming up with these pre-programmed systems or the no programming required solutions. I think that is one of the manufacturers' options that they're providing to be able to alleviate this type of a challenge. Pat, if you're presented with a situation and a customer is considering that, thinking that that's going to help them moving forward, how do you have a conversation to make sure that that's right for them? And is there a way, are there other options you can present that would maybe achieve the same type of results in the fact that they would then have something that's more manageable and more consistent?
So my ideal situation is that, this is going a little off topic, but I'm going to come right back to it, is that we approach programming from a more agile development type of a mindset where you deliver the minimum functionality at the beginning and you plan on taking user feedback and making changes every quarter or 2 or 3 times a year, whatever it is. There's that agreement and that expectation that we're going to get feedback and upgrade this system with user feedback so that they get what they want, because we can't predict the future. And we try all the time to nail it 100% on that first go. And it's a losing battle. It's just impossible to do. Now, bringing in those configurable systems, that may be the perfect first step to get them up and running, as long as there are APIs available for those configured systems. The problem with a lot of them is that that's it. You buy what you buy and you configure it and it can't do anything else. But if you have something like that where you could get quickly set up, TV on, off, a little bit of switching and volume control, and then come back with user feedback, oh, we'd like to route this to there and that to there. As long as that thing has an API where you could write another program that could talk to that, then you're really agile and flexible. So that's what I would really like to see the direction our industry take, because when the painter finished tomorrow or yesterday and they're moving in tomorrow and I have today to find all of my bugs, it's just not the right environment for a software developer.
I think you bring up a very interesting point, and I don't know that people typically think that way, and I've actually heard you speak on this topic before, so I'm glad you're bringing it up. It's something that is not unique to software development, but a little bit more unique to AV programming.
Sure, as everything moves toward the network anyway, and more CIOs and IT people are involved, this may become expected of us.
Sure. So Rich, taking that approach and knowing that we want to be able to come up with a solution that is going to be an opportunity for the customer to grow. It may or may not be backfit, but it gives them the ability to alleviate the troubles that they've been struggling with in the past. What does that conversation look like, and how do you start? How do you to be able to go down the path of we're going to kind of create this a little bit differently than what you're expected, and we're going to need your buy-in.
Well, I think it first comes back to your identity as a company and who you are as a company. The reason being is that your approach is different than, say, a 2-person house, where you're kind of picking and choose, as opposed to a 30-person house where you've got tons of developers in under one roof. The reason why I'm saying that is it comes back to scale. If you are going to be in a commercial environment and you have a university or you have a law firm or something where you've got literally thousands of rooms spread out all over the place. There's going to be a investment on your part from a company standpoint to build that scale. Now, you sometimes get into that chicken and egg. It's like, okay, well, if we build this, then we'll be able to service the 1,000 boardrooms that are out there very quickly, scale it and deploy it and everything else. But at the same time, it's like, well, we also need to make sure that we have projects that are in place in order to accommodate it. So that decision has to be made from a company standpoint. And there are a couple of companies that are doing it right now. There's several in the commercial realm right now, and there's a couple in the residential realm that are saying, okay, look, we're kind of drawing our proverbial line in the sand and saying we are creating this infrastructure that everything else builds out from. But that was a significant risk and bet on their side. In other instances where you still might be in a bespoke situation, the standardization is what you're not there for standardization in the first place. But you have to look at first, I think you said, is your company, and where and you have to take a hard look at your company and say, okay, we'd like to do 1,000 boardrooms. We'd like to do, universities. We'd like to have projects all over the world. But if you don't really have one under your belt, that's wishful thinking at that point. So the first step is, what can you manage as a company? And that next step from what you can manage as a company decides on, okay, how can we focus on a deliverable set to our client base that maximizes our investment, our relationship with them, gives them bang for the buck, and you get better at what you do in your niche. And I think that's always the hard part for a lot of companies and the owners of companies too. We there's a sports term called playing within yourself, right? Knowing your abilities as a company and knowing where you're really going to be and where your market is. And once you can look at it from a business standpoint, who is your actual target market? I think then you can create some standards for your target market and grow from there. I think to try to go far-reaching is something to always have in the back of your head. But from a business standpoint, brother's still got to eat,
Seems to be a common theme. So, well, if we kind of flip that a little bit, though, is it about the provider or is it about the client? And that's a question to ask.
Well, and that's the difference between a product and a service. If you are creating a product, you were going to customer and saying, here is the product that we have created, and we believe it fits your needs. That is a sale, a SKU that you are pushing out. It just happens to be a software SKU. That's far different than we are your problem solver. Tell us what your problem is, and we will develop something to meet that. Some companies can do both. I haven't seen many do it successfully. I think that it's a philosophical mindset of one or the other, is that you're either pushing it out and, and for lack of a better word, you're kind of trying to take over the world with your software, or you are, like in my case, I am a digital concierge. I'm the guy who gets you the electronic version of, courtside tickets at the basketball game. It's company identity. It's figuring out where you are as a company and deciding whether you want to be a product provider. And there's investments and there's pitfalls with that. And there is just as much as there are investments and pitfalls with being a service provider. But I think that's kind of where you have to kind of decide and say, who are we?
So Tim, as a programmer and somebody who I would imagine wants their work valued and wants to be able to put their time to good use, writing code, is it more rewarding and more productive to do something that is going to be a global solution and you're able to kind of put the time into making it into something that is going to be maybe I guess a solution for multiple systems and something that can be adapted, or looking at systems from more of a one-off approach?
It depends. I mean, the reason that I even got involved in what interested me in the first place was the finished product, was being able to walk into a room, push a button, and watch all this stuff happen and go, I did that, right? I made that happen. I wrote the code to make that happen. That to me is the real fulfillment of being a programmer, is being able to overcome the obstacles and the hurdles of, bad command strings being in documentation and figuring out problems. Not that ever happens with any products ever, because every manufacturer always prints the exact command strings in every documentation they've ever printed. I say that a little bit tongue in cheek. If you've never been a programmer, you know that that's not true. But it's overcoming those things and figuring out and going, okay, this is what the client said, or this is what the team said that they wanted to do. Here's the finished product, and I had a hand in that. I think a global solution is neat, but as a programmer, I don't get to see all of it, right? I don't get to see my finished work globally, right? If I'm writing a piece of code and I'm helping, somebody overseas to do something, I may never see that. Now, I do have the satisfaction of knowing it worked, because obviously there's communication there. But I still think it's cool to be able to walk through and walk through on the day of commissioning, going, this is pretty neat because I had a hand in this.
So I can appreciate that, and I think that there are some who don't want to be reinventing the wheel every time and want to be able to kind of come up with those gimmicky ways of seeing things, but you don't actually get to test every single situation and every single variable. And then there are some that want to be able to just say, okay, I walked away from this knowing that it works. Yep. So Patrick, I'll jump over to you. I think that we're all kind of feeling the pressure of the fact that work has to be done quicker, work has to be done more cost effectively, and this goes for technology managers as well as programmers and integrators. What type of techniques can we use to accommodate that, and how? And I hate to kind of keep bringing up the fact that these configurable solutions, or the no programming required, are kind of looming. How do we address that, and how do we continue to be able to offer alternatives that are going to satisfy that need?
But to me, it all kind of comes back to the same conversation, and Rich hit the nail on the head. It's, what's your business model, right? So if you're making custom programming, or you're providing something that's configurable, and what's your market as well? Because in some markets, you'll never be able to write code that you could use everywhere, right? In the mega yacht industry, they don't understand the word no. I want it to work like this. And there's no such thing as no. So you have to throw everything in the garbage and start over sometimes. But if you find a niche, and it doesn't have to be a global thing where you're taking over the world, if you find some kind of a niche, a sports bar or whatever it is that you could write some control code for that's reusable, great. And if you could sell that, wonderful, because especially if it's recurring. I mean, how many times do you need $50 or $100 a month to make a business out of something? So I think it's important to look at, what your market is, what you want to be doing. If you want to be doing custom code, or if you have this product to sell, that's kind of a different thing. If you're very skilled, people seek you to make custom work. So the sales part maybe isn't that difficult. And if you have a product, then you kind of have to go out there and sell it, because the margins might be lower as well. These are all things that you kind of need to consider. But once you're in business custom programming for a while, you're going to have things that to you and your team are kind of configurable, right? I have a module. It can do this. If it fits in this thing, then I put it in there and set a few flags, and that's kind of configuring it as well.
And I know I'll just follow up on this, and I just kind of bring in a little bit of your background and your interests. How does standardized programming languages kind of come into play there? And is there a way that we can utilize those types of things to be able to take things to another level?
Absolutely. I mean, the tools that we use today, the most common ones, are because of our history, right? In the beginning, you had to use proprietary control systems. There was no other choice. There was no other way to do real-time control. But now you've got operating systems like Node.js. They are real-time. So you can use standard programming languages. You could turn a Raspberry Pi into a control system and it will work. And once you get into modern programming languages, it's a lot more flexible, but it requires a lot more brain power and planning up front.
Sure.
Because you're building this structure, you're building a data model basically, and you have to get that right up front. You really have to think about it. You can't say at the end, well, you can, but it just takes more work. I want to add more inputs or outputs. So I think it has a huge place in our industry. You could write classes and reuse them over and over. You could make a room a class. And if you have 1,000 rooms, you did that thing once. And if you need to make a change, you change that class once and it's changed everywhere. Instead of with the old tools, you usually have to copy and paste, search, replace, which is error prone and labor intensive. So I think modern
processor.
Well, that too. Yeah. I mean, just the whole reboot compile thing. If it's just an instance of something running somewhere, you don't even have to reboot it. You just deploy it and it's there. So there's huge potential for it there, but we have a lot of habits and a lot of history. And I think it's going to take some time and some brave souls to start actually deploying this stuff.
I think Patrick brings up a good point in that, and I think the next year, 18 months at the most, is going to force not quite the reckoning, but causing companies to dramatically look at how they're going to be approaching this in the future, and the fact that, you know, we're talking about the back end stuff still right now. You know, we're talking about the processors. We're talking about the nuts and bolts that's always been there for 25 years. But the reality is that our devices, the mobile devices, the BYOD devices, anything that's in the room, that's always what drives what we do. And with HTML and with more traditionally accepted tools out there that are going to be used for user interface design, is going to cause a avalanche in terms of the end users of the company saying, well, we've got a web developer that we can work with who's been doing this for 20-something odd years. They're going to be able to develop and brand and everything that we've already got, that we invested X amount of dollars into our branding for our webpage. We can take part of that and drop that in and make it part of the UI. That's huge. That's something that we're not talking enough about.
Definitely.
That, and again, we were just talking off air a second ago, and just take 30 seconds. Network video is here, and whether it is a dedicated switch running video over IP, or if it is, another manufacturer's got one that's, running a compressed version. But the reality is, I was saying offline, is I'm getting a crash course on network switching to a level that I've never had to before in order to be able to get an image from point A to point B. Now, it's cool because once I get that one image going, theoretically, I can make 1,000 images go the same way. But these are the things that are happening. The dreaded convergence work it is there. And I think that this is a good start to the conversation, what Patrick was talking about, which is, there is going to be more that we're going to be seeing. Virtual processors, virtual processing, a repository where instances are being deployed instead of devices being deployed. And I think it's exciting, but I definitely think that it's something that the conversation needs to be much stronger, because like Patrick said, there's a lot of us that are old dogs that own these companies, right? We've all been doing it for 20 something odd years. I mean, Steve, I know that, you have a great model where you're working with manufacturers. Patrick has the teaching side of things. There's all these great models that are out there. At the same time, we have to be starting that conversation saying, look, we're also aware that we need to start changing what we're doing, and we need to be vocal about it, so that the rest of our fraternity, and including men and women, aren't going to get sideswiped by it.
So Tim, I'll wrap it up with you. Is this a threat or is this an opportunity?
Yes.
I give you the easy questions.
Well, and you
Just
did.
remember.
It's. I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. It's a threat in as much as it's change, right? When we started going through the digital transition, I apologize, I don't remember who wrote this, but it was one of the best examples of what converting analog to digital meant. This is probably 10 years ago now. A young man wrote that back in the 70s and 80s, his dad was a car mechanic and worked on carburetors and four-barrel carburetors his entire life. In the 80s, they introduced something called fuel injection. I am not a car guy, so don't expect me to explain it. I understand it enough, though, that the fuel injector replaced the carburetor, right? It was a dramatic shift in the world of auto mechanics and for folks who had done this their entire life. Same thing is going on here. It's a change, right? It doesn't make it better or worse. It depends on your point of view. It's a challenge, right? It's a threat, but it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to infuse some efficiencies that may need to happen. But it's also an opportunity to leverage something that we've been talking about for years, both on this entire network and in the industry at large. And that's the inclusion of IT, right? It depends on who you ask in the world of AV, whether or not we're a part of IT or we're concurrent with IT. But there is IT stuff inside AV, right? And there's AV stuff living on the IT network. It's probably about time that we start looking at that from a programming and control and automation standpoint as well, a little bit more than we have in the past. And that's why I see it as an opportunity. It's also a threat to folks who've been doing this a long time, but it's also an opportunity to learn and grow and maybe make yourself a little bit more streamlined.
I think that's a good way of wrapping this up, and I appreciate that. So that'll do it for us for today. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but that's been another great conversation and certainly one that will continue. I'd like to thank our guests today, Patrick Murray. How can people get in touch with you, learn more about Control House or any of the endeavors that you've been doing, including some of the learning resources that Rich mentioned?
Thanks, Steve. You can find out more at learnavprogramming.com. And I'm currently holding a webinar once a week to show people how to turn an iOS mobile device into an AV controller. So if you're interested in that, go to the website and sign up, learnavprogramming.com.
Cool. Thank you. Rich, great to have another show with you. How can people get in touch with you that don't already know?
Well, first I want to wish the iPhone a happy 10th birthday today.
I hope that we're not going to sing.
No, but kind of dovetails into it. It's only been 10 years since that thing has been introduced.
Wow.
But for your technology needs, contact me at rfregosa on Twitter, Fregosa Design. Type my name into the interwebs and something always interesting pops up. So, but other than that, obviously,
I hope it's all good.
Yeah, hopefully. Nothing incriminating. I think I've scrubbed the internet of that at least.
I still
Very
have
nice.
pictures, just saying.
And last but not least, if you need to get know more about AVNation or the Chicago Bears,
Yay!
Tim Albright, thanks for joining us. How can people get in touch with you?
There's two ways, I guess. You can go to the website, avnation.tv, which we'll talk about in a second. Twitter is at TD Tim David Albright.
Oh, thanks for being on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my name's Steve Greenblatt. You can reach me on social media at Steve Greenblatt. Controlconcepts.net is our website. Been putting out some interesting content and also writing for some publications. Check those out and let me know what you think. But more importantly, visit the AVNation website. Check out this show as well as many of the other weekly and monthly shows. Visit the underwriters. They're important to us. Please check them out. And there's a ton of Infocom coverage on the site. Many of us participated in that, and it's a great way if you were or were not at the show to be able to catch up on some of the latest products and manufacturers' announcements. So the other thing that I'd like to ask is that leave a comment or give us a review on iTunes. We don't have any, and I'd like to see if we can at least get one or two to get our name out there and get some more people listening. So I'd like
we
to
don't
hear
want to
from
call
you.
we don't want to call our moms to tell them to review our
I don't know
our
if my
podcast.
mom could if I told her.
Oh Lord.
But yeah, it'd be important to us. So I appreciate that. And so that'll be it for us for today. This has been A State of Control.